Thank you, Honorable Mutafa. I'll recognize Honorable Shongwe and thereafter Honorable Makobele.
Thank you,
Honorable Shongwe
Chair.
first.
I then, Chair, want to ask and understand what is the need for us to nominate you as an acting chair now if we have to wait for Uche to start the meeting? Is the meeting about Uche Diko, or can we proceed with the meeting? I support the notion that we should move on with the meeting because we have a chairperson, which is you now. So why change the agenda for that reason? Or is there any other reason, if I may ask? Thank you.
Sorry, as I indicated, the item 4 has been moved to the end because Honorable Kusela had placed the item as the chair of this portfolio committee on the agenda, and hence I see it only fit that she presides over that matter. Sorry?
What's the word? Point of order, Chair, on you. Chair, you are asking us as a portfolio committee to adopt an agenda. And we are saying you have presented to the portfolio committee a proposed agenda, which we adhered to, hence we are here. There is no need for us to change the agenda as it stands. As it is, we are wasting time. We could really adopt the agenda and we will support that. We work on the agenda as is. It stops being the item of the chairperson of the portfolio committee. It is an item of the portfolio committee. Because if it is an item of the chairperson, then we will sit and not say a thing and listen to the chairperson. Unless this is what you are trying to tell us, that it is an item of the chairperson and not of the committee. And because it is an item of the committee, you are empowered to carry on with the agenda as we received it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, Acting Chairperson. My name is now Tambo from the EFF. I do not see a reason why we are opposed to the restructuring of the agenda as a portfolio committee. I really don't. I would have thought it would be collegial, actually, understanding that the chairperson hasn't taken an independent decision to just be late for the meeting. I would be very hurt if I would hear that there was a proposal to amend the agenda, and we mustn't pretend like this is not an issue of national and international concern, that my colleagues rejected an amendment of the agenda because I was delayed by a flight. All items on the agenda are equally important, the minutes, everything we're discussing, but we know very well that we're discussing a matter of international importance. And as colleagues, I do not see why we would not adjust the agenda to accommodate a flight delay that is outside of the hands of the chairperson. It doesn't mean the agenda item belongs to the chairperson, but it's an appreciation of all of our collective vested interests in this agenda item. So we have, even you, chairperson, I think you're allowing the meeting to make it about the chair. It's not about the chair. It's about us reaching consensus as a committee as to appreciating the need for full committee participation. These are not committee members who are saying they have chosen to abscond. They're delayed by a flight. Let's allow the restructuring of the agenda to allow full committee participation, and that includes the chair, even if it wasn't the chair. Let's not stifle that, that opportunity to engage. I would support the restructuring of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Makobela, I recognize you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, it's unfortunate that we sit here bickering about adoption of an agenda and also starting of a meeting, which brings me to question your fitness to hold that office, that chair temporarily. Because as a chairperson, you need to be able to lead. We cannot sit here and debate whether we must move items because one member of the committee who happens to be the presiding officer of this committee is delayed by a flight. All of us took flight last night because we understood the weight of this meeting and the changes that were made to accommodate the weight of this item. So this delay of a flight cannot hold us at ransom to deal with this item decisively as number one item as it is on the agenda, and we want to adopt it as such. We cannot allow you to play this delay tactics, Chairperson, to accommodate other members that are late. They should have taken the flights late with us last night to make sure that we're here on time. We refuse to be disadvantaged by them. If they felt it was important to be here on time, they should have made arrangements last night. And if they're not here, unfortunately, this item is not even more than any other item that we deal with on a weekly basis in this committee. Just because it's got a media attention, billionaires' attention, and any other international attention doesn't mean it's more than supplying rural connectivity by USASA reports that we deal with on EMISA issues that affects our people daily. So we refuse, Chairperson. We need to continue with this agenda as it is. If they are not here, they can catch up online. They can find a way to send their questions if they have any comments or questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Makobela. Honorable Mkhacha, first Honorable Megan, and then Honorable Mkhacha. Sorry, Honorable Mkhacha, first Honorable Megan Adonis. She had her hands up first.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I don't think this is a waste of time, other than to clarify ourselves about the rules of the House. And the rules were quoted. And I was expecting that a person who's opposed to the restructuring of the agenda would quote from the rules the basis of his objection or her objections. And if none, Chair, then you are empowered to make a ruling. Thanks, Chair.
And thank you, Honorable Mkhacha. Honorable Megan.
Honorable Chair, greetings to honorable members. Chair, I think I would like to just also agree with my honorable members and what has been cited by Honorable Matafa as well. I think we have the full discretion in order for us to proceed. And it's unfortunate that we are saying we do not want to enter into a debate, but we have opened the platform for a debate. The shifting of items on the agenda does not nullify any item, and therefore we have seconded and we have said that we shall proceed with the recommendations as per amendments that proposed by the chairperson. Thank you very much.
Honorable Sitole.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, we mustn't ambush ourselves because we came here with a straight agenda. So if this agenda has been changed, we're supposed to be briefed before we adopt this agenda. So now I think we have to go back to our original agenda so that what the chairperson is on the way. He will find us on our meeting. So now I think, Honorable Chairperson, the best way, we have to go back to our agenda as we do have, and we have been received, and then after that we can go forward.
Thank you, Honorable Sitole. Honorable Matafa.
Thank you very much, Chair, for another opportunity. Chair, before you make a ruling, I would respectfully caution the committee in terms of them wanting us to be mechanical in how we approach our procedures. This would not be the first time that an agenda has been amended responding to issues and circumstances that would have obtained, and also prioritizing of certain items. Because we have had instances where ministers would either run late or request to leave early, and as a result will then amend the agenda in the beginning of the meeting in order to be responsive to those particular situations. So before you make your ruling, let us be cautioned as a committee that it will set a bad precedent if we're going to be so rigid that we cannot alter an agenda or allow the chair the discretion is empowered by him being in that particular chair, because it will disadvantage us going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa, Honorable Makobela, and this will be the last stand I take before I take a decision. Honorable Bolani will be the last stand. First, Honorable Bolani, then Honorable Makobela, and then the chair will take a decision.
Chair, in the interest of time, I request that we put.
Indeed, Chairperson, let's put it to a vote, because in all the instances where we have changed the agenda, there was consensus. This case, there is no consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Thank you for the robust discussion, and I think this is a democratic parliament. I had arrived at a decision that I was going to propose to this House, and that decision was to proceed with the agenda before us, largely because as we have been guided in terms of the rules of parliament, there's nothing precluding us from doing what we have done to rearrange the agenda in the light of a matter that is of international and national interest, and to allow the full contingency of this committee to be present and citing the fact that the chairperson is an integral part of this committee and she constitutes an important part, and also further citing that the chairperson was not negligent in her timing of her flight, it was out of her hand. And also citing the fact that if we are not amicable to the amendment of the agenda, it will not be in the spirit of collegiality of this portfolio committee going forward, and it will set a wrong precedent. Therefore, it is my view that we should proceed with the agenda, and the first item will be the adoption of the minutes. Honorable Badlani, you wanted to speak? Thank you. Can we proceed with the item on the agenda, please? The chairperson has ruled.
Aibo, Chair.
I recognize you.
When I spoke, Chair, I asked that we put it to a vote.
Okay. Now let's allow democracy to take its faults. I think this is a good, useful. The people are watching the democracy. Honorable Badlani and Honorable Mokobela suggested that we go to a vote. Let us put it to a vote. Those by the show of hands, and I as well as a member of the portfolio, those in show of hands that we proceed with the agenda, amended agenda before us, please raise your hands. Yes, Honorable Badlani.
Could the Secretariat please assist us in terms of ATC, who are the members who would have a vote in this?
Sure.
Because we know there's also alternate members.
Chairperson?
Yes. Honorable Matafa.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I plead with my comrades from my caucus that we withdraw on supporting the...
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, Honorable Matafa, I wasn't quite hear you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to plead with members of my caucus that we do not allow this meeting to go into a vote. Normally, the committees of parliament pursue a consensus approach. So instead of dividing the House, I would wish to withdraw my caucus and allow the agenda as initially submitted and supported by Honorable Badlani to proceed.
No, thank you so much, Honorable Matafa. I also support then, in the interest of not setting the wrong precedent for this House and delaying future meetings where it goes to votes. What this House has demonstrated, unfortunately, is the lack of collegiality amongst us. And as your chairperson had originally ruled, we proceed. But we will proceed with the original agenda that was circulated, and that will be the first item, will be the item on the minutes. Thank you so much. Jared, can you please flag the minutes? Okay, yes, Secretariat, can you please talk through the minutes?
Sorry, Chair. Wasn't the first item, was that the first item in
The minutes.
initial agenda? It wasn't, Chair.
Or was it the second item? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. So the first item was the minister's briefing. My apologies. So can we have an adoption of the mover for the adoption of the agenda, please?
Chairperson, I move.
Thank you so much, Honorable Badlani. Honorable Badlani moves. Who wants to second the adoption? Honorable.
Honorable Shongwe,
Thank you so much, Honorable Shongwe. Approves the adoption.
The chair's here.
Adoption of the minutes. Long live the chairperson of the portfolio committee.
You are doing great, Honorable
Thank you
Subrata.
so much.
Carry on.
I think this was a wonderful demonstration of the democracy of a democratic parliament of South Africa. Let us welcome the chairperson of the portfolio committee, Honorable Kosela Dikosang. Thank you so much, Honorable.
Just to thank you, Honorable Subrata. We are disappointed with Todd.
Long live the acting chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Subrata. Honorable members, let me apologize once again. I think everything that could have gone wrong went wrong today. Phew, okay, I'm out of breath. But let me thank you for not voting. I think as I was coming through the gate, I heard you discussing voting about the agenda. And I was of the view that that would be the worst thing that would happen to this portfolio committee. We have never had an issue that we were not able to find one another on, and we were not able to at least resolve, if not through consensus, but through agreement. So thank you very much. Let me also greet the Minister, Honorable Malatsi. I see there's leadership of the department. I don't know if the chair of ICASA eventually made it. I left him at the airport with Honorable Ndlela, amongst others. It's a full house. I see esteemed stakeholders, members of the media. You are all welcomed to this meeting. This is an ordinary meeting of the Portfolio Committee. I see the agenda is on the screens, with the first issue being a briefing by the department on the draft policy directions, the adoption of minutes, the briefing by the department on SABC debt to Centec, and then the Film and Publications Board. Was the agenda adopted, Honorable Subrathi? So the agenda has been moved and it's been adopted. Maybe then let's start with the first issue, which is the business of the day. Apologies, I'm still listening to you on YouTube.
Demonstration of the democracy.
Thank you. Let me maybe just introduce the first item on the agenda. We had to make a change to our agenda on Friday last week to include a briefing by the department on the policy directives that have recently been issued by Minister Malatsi. Let me thank the Minister for honoring our invitation. And indeed, it was an invitation. It was not summons. I've heard members of the media, to great consternation by the Minister, saying he was summoned to Parliament. And why I'm making that clarification is because a summons hold particular legal consequence and significance in terms of the rules of Parliament. So the Minister was invited, he was not summoned. I think in terms of background, members will be aware we've been dealing with this issue for quite a while in terms of ICASA and licensing. And on the 21st of May, the Minister issued policy directives on the need to issue new ECNS licenses, which is the Electronic Communications Network Services license. Then on the 23rd of May, the Minister then issued another policy directive on broad-based Black economic empowerment. Now, we thought that it was important to invite the Minister to brief the committee on these directives for a number of reasons. One, we need to make sure that the Minister at all times exercises his executive power in a rational manner, in a lawful manner. And then secondly, I'm sure it seemed quite curious to some of us who would have seen those directives. Firstly, the timing of the directives. I don't think I need to explain that as all of this was happening, the President was in the White House, where discussions were expected to ensue relating to issues such as the licensing of Starlink. And secondly then, given the fact that we do have other satellite operators in this country, and there's never been a need to issue such policy directives, we thought all of that required that perhaps the Minister must take us through his thinking and indeed the rationality and lawfulness of his actions. So without wasting any time, let me hand over to you, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Excuse me. Thanks very much, Chairperson, and greetings to the members of the Portfolio Committee. Chair, in terms of guidance, because the agenda speaks particularly to the policy directive on the EEIPs, and in your remarks you've made also reference to the ECNS one. So I just want guidance so that we handle everything that is expected of us, and then we proceed smoothly, because I would then ask with the committee that we divide the sections into two if we're covering two topics, to allow each and every subject to be dealt with separately.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think in reference, I put them together with the assumption that they are related. If that is incorrect, I think in your presentation, then you could outline, but it would be better if we get one presentation, deal with it on both matters, if you please, or if you believe that the other one, since it was not put on the agenda, you wish not to deal with it, that is also fine. It may come up in questions. Thank you.
No, thanks. That clarity is important so that we move in tandem in terms of what needs to happen. What we'll then do, Chair and honorable members, is I will focus on the first part, which is the core of the presentation, and then ask the colleagues.
Honorable Subaraya?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just want to record that we did receive a presentation from the department within the Portfolio Committee. And is there a representative from the department here? I don't see the DG or any of the members from the department. Is the department represented here other than the Minister? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Minister, do you want to clarify?
Yes, there are representatives from the department led by Acting DDG Ngobeni on my left, and also the team from policy in the department led by both Mr. Alfred Motu and Mr. Alf Wills. So that's why I asked that point, because I'm aware and that there's that presentation that Honorable Subrathi spoke about, so that we all move in the same place. And that's why I said I will then lead the core of the submission on the EIPs. The two colleagues will then come in on the section of the ECNS presentation that's being alluded to. And then we can handle questions in totality in that way if the committee so accepts.
I believe that is in order.
Okay.
Thank you, Minister. You may proceed.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. And I must indicate that I welcome this opportunity to engage with the Committee on the Policy Directives, particularly because obviously, given the fact that the Gazette was last week and it generated a lot of coverage and publicity, the committee saw it fit that we are then invited. And members would recall that in the previous engagements that we have had with the committee, going as back as last year, we've indicated the efforts from the department side around the full recognition of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector. This is reflected also in the medium-term development plan of the 7th administration of the Government of National Unity. So this work predates the events of last week. Last week was the third layer in that process culminating in the Gazette. And I want to also just be clear that it's not about introducing a dispensation for any individual nor any company or introducing preference. The policy direction, members would recall that we started working on it around September. On the 4th of October, as we are required by the process that outlines how policy directions must be handled, we released communication to ICASA in the form of a letter expressing an intention to issue a policy directive to provide policy clarity on the full introduction of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector. That was followed by a public communication released on that specific day. And as required by the process, we submitted the draft policy direction to ICASA to give them an opportunity to be able to engage with it. So the events that then transpired afterwards was ICASA has an opportunity, because we are compliant with the process of the law, to establish its opinion on what it feels should be done in answering the question that we are attempting to answer, which is a reconciliation of the ICT sector codes and the ownership regulations around license ownership. So that process outlines the lawfulness of the intention of the policy directive, because it is prescribed under the Electronic Communications Act, particularly Section 3, which stipulates that the minister may issue to the authority, in this case ICASA, policy directives that are consistent with this act, national policies, and related legislation. And what we are trying to do is then grounded on that very foundation. And as I indicated, that once we had fulfilled the first step, which is to allow ICASA to engage with the policy directive, This circles back to the issue of the reference to ownership being held by persons from historically disadvantaged groupings. The regulations state that this must not be less than 30% or such other conditions or a higher percentage as may be prescribed under Section 43K of the ICASA Act. So that is what we relied on in the instituting of, one, the policy directive and the fundamental question that it seeks to answer. The policy direction refers specifically to the ICT sector codes, which were published under the prescripts of the BBBE Act, which we know was adopted in 2013. So the intention is to ensure that there is a whole and consistent application of the BBBE Act and the ICT sector codes. This includes a key element, which is to ensure that transformation takes place in the telecommunications sector, in the broadcasting sector, in the same way that is applicable in other sectors through the enablement of broad-based economic empowerment. And I think it's also important to take a step back to the formulation of the ICT sector codes, which were approved in 2016. And it provided for recognition, amongst other things, ownership element, the management control element, skills development, enterprise and supply development, and other specific contributions that are relevant to the sector. So this mechanism around equity equivalent programs and how they can be utilized and how they should be utilized in the sector is not a new invention. It's not an invention by me. It is an attempt, in my view, to say that in the formulation of any regulations in our sector, it has to be read consistently with the ICT sector codes, which emerge from the broad-based economic empowerment. And we know that this use of equity equivalent programs have been a long-standing regulatory tool that has been in place in the sector. The DTIC approved this in 2016. And I think it's important also at this stage to clarify that while the ECA, which guides policy making in our sector, and the ICASA Act do allow for ICASA to make the regulations, it also allows for ICASA in making those regulations that it must give effect to the whole parts of the ICT sector code. And my duty is to ensure that there is alignment between the codes, between the regulations, in fulfillment of all our national laws, in this case citing the BBBE Act. And I believe, and I strongly believe that in terms of the process that we have followed from the formulation of the policy directive leading ultimately to the gazetting, we have followed the prescripts of what a ministerial policy direction should follow. We have also fulfilled the key step, which is the engagement with the authority being CASA. And I think this is also important because the consultation with the authority means that its submission must be given due consideration. It does not mean, one, that the regulator can stop a minister from exploring a policy direction, because there are two steps. The first step is the opportunity for the regulator to engage with the draft policy direction. The second step is post the public comment stage, which is where we are in now. We must take into consideration what each and every interested stakeholder or anyone who has views on this policy direction, and to have their views being aligned, to have their views being considered in the formulation of the policy. The other additional point that I want to bring to the attention of the committee is that in 2014, the DCDT amended the ECA, and it explained in the reasons for the amendment at the time, particularly the amendment of Section 9, subsection 2B, that the focus of this act has been changed from the empowerment of, and in brackets, historically disadvantaged groups to broad-based Black economic empowerment. Therefore, the required equity ownership by historically disadvantaged individuals in Section 9, subsection 2B has been retained for the time being, provided that broad-based Black economic empowerment requirements may replace it in due course. And that is an important consideration because On assessment of the ownership regulations, it is my view that the regulations did not wholly take into consideration the reference that is being made, one, in the exploratory memorandum on the purpose of the amendments, and in particular, the reference to such other conditions as it is expressed in section 9, subsection 2B of the provisions of section 43K of the ICASA Act. It did not apply broad-based black economic empowerment, which is defined both in the ICASA Act and in the ECA, and its meaning is well articulated too. So, considering all of this, it is my view that to settle this question, the policy direction is the best avenue to answer this, to answer this question. In the end, colleagues, in the end, the ICASA regulations may continue, if the authority so chooses, may continue to require the 30% equity ownership by historically disadvantaged individuals. But what it must do is to also permit the commitments that are envisaged and articulated for in the ICT sector codes around valid conditions for applications for individual licenses. This meaning the equity equivalence program. So where are we now in terms of the process that I've outlined? Post the Gazette, we have a 30-day period in which all stakeholders, and by the volume of the contributions on this subject, it is very clear that there are multiple stakeholders who've got very interesting views on this, that they'll be able to make their submissions through that period. What is incumbent upon the ministry and the department is, in consideration of those inputs from the public, they must inform the final formulation of the policy direction, which will then be shared with the regulator as it is required. And in closing, Chair, I want to underpin this point, which is important and has been diluted in some of the conversation around. I am pretty clear that transformation is sacrosanct in our country, that it's a non-negotiable in order for the country to achieve its aspirations, but most importantly, to live to the provisions of the BEE Act as it was articulated and envisaged. So we are not attempting to open a special dispensation for Starlink or any other company or an individual. We are saying that the regulations in our sector must consistently make provision for the two choices that exist in any other sector and other aspects of the ICT when it comes to the role of multinationals, whether small or big, that the provisions around the option of a 30% local ownership or the pathway of equity equivalence must be consistently available, or at least for the authority to consider the consistency of that, of that option. So the ultimate intention is to ensure that the regulation is aligned with national empowerment regulations for licensing and potential new entrants. And lastly, Chair, which I think will then sum up before we get into the conversation, is the sentiment around the role of the regulator vis-a-vis ministerial roles. It is very clear in terms of the process that ICASA can at any given time amend its ownership regulations at its so fits. What we are seeking and raising the flag for is that in doing so, that must be in tandem with the ICT sector codes and that it be applied consistently. And to go back to what you said, Chair, which is a very valid point around timing. Colleagues, different people are always going to have different views about the timing. And I would really like that in that conversation, we are mindful of the steps that predate the visit that took place to Washington, to be mindful that the work that culminated, even in engaging with ICASA as early as the 4th of October, would not have been done that way if all of a sudden there is a realization that we have to gazette by Friday. We did say, even at the time, in many of the public engagements that we had, that the intention in terms of our own timelines would be to aim towards a finalization of the policy direction towards mid-2025. And we are now as close to mid-25 as humanly possible. We would not have predicted that the events, there would be a visit last week, but I make that point to showcase that there is no conspiracy on our part with regards to this policy direction. There is no underhanded effort in darkness to railroad this into the South African public. We have at all times communicated of the process publicly, and we are comfortable that the stage that we are in now is a legitimate stage which opens the process for the public and all stakeholders to make submissions on their views, and we will consider those views. We have to consider those views because we can't preempt the final determination of how those public comments will be. And there's been some sentiments, Chair, that why not proceed or pursue the avenue of an amendment to the ECA, which has been the observation of some commentators. There are multiple avenues that are available to consider which instruments would be timeous, which instrument would be effective in addressing the question that we are seeking the regulator to ask. And we felt that on the consideration of all those options, the policy directive is still the effective intervention to do that. In the end, in the final consideration of all the comments that are being made, it may well be that there is a need to explore the amendment of the ECA. And members of the committee would know, having made some comments to this regard, that there are various elements of the ECA which require amendments, and it's been a topic that is ongoing. And those will also even be considered in dealing with the fundamental questions around the holistic amendment of the ECE versus the efforts that are currently going on. What we are looking at is we have to maximize options that can help deal with one of the most pressing fundamental needs in our country, which is around broadband connectivity and expanding it to every corner of this country. And in doing so, that we abide by the transformation policies of this country, and that's the reconciliation that we are seeking. On that note, Chair, I'd like to close this one and then hand over to Mr. Mutu, and I'll fill through the acting DG to deal with the ECNS one, and then we can have the engagement guided by you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Clarify for us before we get into the second presentation. I did say at opening that I assumed there's a relationship between the two. Is there a relationship as you see it, or you just, I don't mean it condescendingly, but you woke up one day and said this one, then 2 days later this one?
No, sir, that formula of just waking up and thumb-sucking things is very self-destructive. I wouldn't do that. So the work towards the second one is a continuation of the efforts from the 6th administration. It had been in the pipelines, and the process of consultation was such that, as I had indicated, before you get to the gazetting again, you give adequate opportunity to the authority to do so. I think in the overall sense, there is a relation because they speak around licensing conditions, they speak about competition in the space, and they seek to deal with the question around, closing the digital divide. So that's where the commonalities are.
Thank you very much. Acting